these things can take unexpected turns. We had thought, based on prosecutors' claims in court, that the Paul Manafort case wasn't going to be at all about President Trump or the Trump campaign, and certainly not about Russia. But today, in open court in the Paul Manafort case, boy, howdy, did the trial go to all of those places today. In fact, the Manafort trial went a little nuts today. I mean, it's not like it went nuts in the sense that it went insane. It just veered off in a lot of directions at once. Paul Manafort's defense attorney at one point elicited from Trump's deputy campaign chairman, Rick Gates, that at some point a decade ago, Mr. Gates had a secret extramarital affair on which he spent some of the money that he either earned alongside Paul Manafort or embezzled from Paul Manafort, depending on how you count the cash. Okay. Rick Gates today also testified to a lot of nitty-gritty details about how he allegedly helped Paul Manafort lie about his income, both to evade taxes and to obtain fraudulent loans from banks. But despite prosecutors having earlier asserted that the Manafort case wasn't going to be about Russia and wasn't going to be about Trump and wasn't going to be about the Trump campaign, the Manafort trial did veer toward those places today unexpectedly. Now, the swerve toward Russia took place while prosecutors were conducting their direct examination of Rick Gates. So Rick Gates is their own witness. It's not a hostile interaction between him and the prosecutors. They're doing a direct exam of Rick Gates. And in that direct examination, prosecutors walked Rick Gates through something we previously hadn't known about Paul Manafort's work in the former Soviet Union. This is from the transcript. Quote, question from the prosecutor. You testified earlier about payments from Ukrainian businessmen to Mr. Manafort. Did that include payments for policy work? Answer from Gates. It did. Question. Okay, what type of policy work did Mr. Manafort do in the Ukraine? Answer. When Viktor Yanukovych was elected president, when the Party of Regions took control, Manafort entered into a policy contract. We describe it as policy advisory, in the sense of once Mr. Yanukovych was elected, he was elected on a platform of issues. So Manafort worked with the local political officials there to help implement those policy initiatives based on those campaign promises. Question from the prosecutor. And was there an agreement for a 2-year policy contract or payments over a 2-year period of time? Answer. Well, it was. It started out as potentially, once the president was elected, it was on an annual basis. But the belief was that it would be for the duration of the president's tenure. Question. And in terms of those 2 years at least, what were the terms of the payments? What was the total amount? What were the installment payments? Answer. So the total amount was $4 million a year. And I think one year it was actually changed, again, from a denomination point of view, to 4 million euros per year. That's new. And the reason that is a swerve toward Russia today in this case is that, I mean, what we previously knew about Manafort operating in Ukraine was that he was being paid by Yanukovych and Yanukovych's party to help him win elections in Ukraine. We didn't know that Paul Manafort was also being paid $4 million a year or 4 million euros per year once Yanukovych was in office to manage his policies as the leader of Ukraine. Right? The reason that's a swerve toward Russia is because once Yanukovych was elected, his policies took a hard turn away from Europe and toward Vladimir Putin. The reason Yanukovych was thrown out of office in a popular uprising of the Ukrainian people is because once he was in power, he turned hard line away from the EU and toward Moscow. Apparently, while we just learned today, Paul Manafort was being paid $4 million a year to advise him on how he should govern. In Michael Isikoff and David Korn's book, Russian Roulette, they interviewed the career State Department official who was the senior diplomat on Russia in the U.S. government for years. Isikoff and Korn asked her about what her reaction was when she learned that Paul Manafort had been named Trump's campaign chairman in 2016. She said her answer was this, quote, Manafort? Manafort? She thought, quote, he's been a Russian stooge for 15 years. Well, today we learned that Manafort was not just getting pro-Russia politicians elected overseas, he was getting paid millions of dollars a year to manage the policy positions of at least one overseas politician while that guy changed the direction of his country to align itself with Putin and Russia. So that was a surprise revelation today. Why'd Trump pick him? And then there was just this one last thing. Again, prosecutors have gone out of their way to say that the Manafort trial wasn't going to be about Trump or the Trump campaign. That is also where it went today, though. And if you've been paying close attention to the Manafort drama as it's been unfolding, you might have seen some of this coming for a while. We've at least been reporting on the disparate pieces of it as they've sort of come across the horizon as we've all been paying attention to Paul Manafort. Today, all of those pieces finally fit together in court. The first piece that we saw of this was when we learned about what happened on the day that Paul Manafort quit the Trump campaign. In August 2016, under a cloud of revelations about his work in the former Soviet Union, he quits the Trump campaign. That same day, Paul Manafort somehow also found time to set up a company, an LLC called Summer Breeze. That was weird, right? You'd think he'd have other priorities the day he was quitting running the Republican nominee's campaign for president, but he found time that day to set up Summer Breeze. Then we learned that Summer Breeze received multiple loans totaling something like $16 million over a period of just a few months after he left the campaign. And he got that $16 million in multiple loans from a tiny little bank in Chicago. Those $16 million worth of loans to Paul Manafort's Summer Breeze were kind of a strange foray for that little bank. It represented a very large portion of the loanable assets from that bank. That bank was set up explicitly to cater to U.S. veterans. Paul Manafort is not a veteran. So all these little weird pieces about the Manafort story, we could sort of tell that eventually they'll fit together, but we couldn't tell how. Then in March of last year, the Wall Street Journal gave us another piece. They were first to report on a strange detail involving the founder and CEO of that bank that had given Manafort's Summer Breeze company the $16 million in loans. The Journal reported that the CEO of that bank was, quote, vying to become Trump's army secretary. That was a weird detail that made no sense for months. But then this year in February, we got more almost unbelievable laugh out loud detail about that weird fact. Quote, around the time his bank made the Manafort loans in late 2016 and early 2017, Stephen Calk was seeking to become Mr. Trump's army secretary. Stephen Calk, the CEO of the bank. Quote, Mr. Calk was placing calls to the Pentagon and specifically to Army headquarters, asking for briefings to prepare himself for a possible job. Quote, Mr. Calk's overtures to the Army raised questions among military leaders as to how to respond. He's calling the Army saying, I'm ready to be briefed for my new job. Army's like, sorry, your name is what? Then 3 days after that reporting about him calling the Pentagon about his new job, the local ABC station in Chicago was first to report that those sketchy loans from this little bank to Paul Manafort had turned up, of all places, as an issue in the divorce filings for that little bank president and his soon-to-be ex-wife. Quote, former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort's name has been dragged into a high-dollar Chicago divorce case. Quote, the divorce case involves Chicago banker Stephen Calk, founder and CEO of the Federal Savings Bank. And indeed, we on this show later obtained these court documents from that divorce case. I think these have never been shown on TV before. But these documents, in fact, show that as part of the divorce proceedings involving this bank's CEO, his wife's attorneys specifically subpoenaed in their divorce case, quote, the entire loan file for any and all loans made to Paul Manafort or any agent, representative, or third party on his behalf. The wife's attorneys then updated the subpoena later to demand, quote, records evidencing the source of funds used to fund any and all loans made to Paul Manafort, Summer Breeze LLC, or any agent, representative, or third party on his behalf. Why are the Paul Manafort loans turning up in the bank CEO's divorce filings? What does his wife want the loans to Paul Manafort to be explained as part of the divorce? How does that? Next piece of the puzzle came when a federal judge in Manafort's case, surprise, unsealed the names of 5 witnesses who'd been offered immunity in exchange for their testimony for prosecutors against Manafort. 2 of the 5 witnesses granted immunity in exchange for their testimony turned out to be employees of this same little bank in Chicago that made these loans. Why'd they need immunity? So we've seen all of these pieces of this puzzle falling into place over the past more than a year now. Well, today in court, they finally all got fitted together. Rick Gates on the witness stand. He gets confronted with exhibit number 399. This email is dated Thursday, November 24th, 2016. Subject, Defense Department service secretaries from Paul Manafort to Rick Gates. And then this is the total of the email. Quote, Rick, we need to discuss Steve Kalk for Secretary of Army. I hear the list is being considered this weekend. Signed, P. I mean, as crazy as it has seemed from the very beginning, as far-fetched and laugh-out-loud ridiculous as this allegation has seemed, ever since it was hinted at in the press that there was some connection between Paul Manafort's weird bank fraud allegations and his time on the Trump campaign and the Army, it really looks like one of the things that happened on the Donald Trump for President campaign is that the campaign chairman really did apparently sell the promise of a job running the United States Army in exchange for cash. That apparently really happened. I wonder how the Army feels about that. And that leaves me with one last question. And we'll get some expert legal advice here in a second that may be able to answer this last point. After that email was produced in court today about the Trump campaign apparently selling this would-be job offer to run the Army, the defense counsel for Paul Manafort asked Rick Gates in open court if anybody else from the special counsel's office had questioned him about his own work on the Trump campaign. So this is from the transcript. This is Paul Manafort's lawyer, Kevin Downing, questioning Rick Gates. Question. Now, in terms of your cooperation with the Office of Special Counsel after you took your plea, did you have occasion to be interviewed by other members of the Office of Special Counsel about the Trump campaign? Answer by Rick Gates. Yes. Question. And were you interviewed on several occasions about your time at the Trump campaign? Interjection from the prosecutor, Greg Andrus. Objection, Your Honor. The judge says, all right, do you need to come to the bench? Prosecutor, Mr. Andrus, says, please. The judge says, all right, you may do so. And then this is the next thing in the transcript. Look at that. Pages 1399 through 1405 are filed under seal. 6 pages of discussion at the bench, sealed, and we're not allowed to see what happened next. So the judge brings the lawyers up to the bench to discuss the matter without the jury hearing. It does not end up in the transcript. We don't know what happened. And then they adjourned for a long recess thereafter. Paul Manafort case has now become a case that, in part, is about the Trump campaign, not just because Manafort was Trump's campaign chair. Prosecutors themselves went there today by essentially offering evidence in court that Trump's campaign chairman was offering the job of running the U.S. Army for sale for cash. Why are they then also objecting to any further discussion about the Trump campaign during this trial? I have a feeling that tells us something important about what's about to happen next, but we should also probably get a really good lawyer here to decode it for us. We shall do so. Coming up, stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.